Let's dive into something pretty amazing. We're talking C3RTIFY today. This platform wants to slash costs for clinical trials, like by a lot. We're talking maybe even 30%,
Yeah.
and get those new drugs out there way faster. Yeah, years faster. And they're doing it all with blockchain. We've got three sources here that break down how C3RTIFY makes this happen.
The cool thing is how C3RTIFY just tackles the problem of trust, straight on. Think about it. You hear about this promising new drug in trials, right? Then suddenly, bam, there's news about data being messed with. How can anyone be sure those results are even real?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're talking about people's lives here after all. So how does C3RTIFY actually fix this?
It all comes down to what makes blockchain so powerful. It can't be changed, right? Once data is on a blockchain, it's basically impossible to tamper with. C3RTIFY uses this to keep a record of every single data point in a trial. And it's tamper-proof.
Okay, that makes sense in theory. But for those of us who aren't like blockchain gurus, how does that work practically?
So imagine a hospital, right? They accidentally leak patient data. That's a huge IPA violation. With C3RTIFY, they'd know about that breach immediately. Any change to the data would be flagged. That level of security keeps the risks down, and those potential IPA fines too.
So it's not just protecting the data itself, it's about making sure those really complicated compliance rules are followed.
Exactly. And get this, C3RTIFY goes even further. They've made a system where anyone can verify the data. Researchers, regulators, even patients.
Wait, so anyone can check if the data's been messed with, but they don't actually see the data itself? That sounds almost like magic.
Right. That's where this zero-knowledge proof technology comes in. It lets you check without revealing the sensitive stuff. Now, for the hardcore blockchain folks out there, C3RTIFY uses a specific kind, a ZK snark. But even without all the technical details, the result is clear.
It sounds like a total game changer. It's like having this ultra-secure lockbox. You can check if it's been opened, but you don't need to see what's inside. But managing all this security can't be easy, right?
You'd think it'd be this super complicated system, but it's not. C3RTIFY's platform is actually really user-friendly. You don't need to be a blockchain whiz. They have a simple four-step wizard to walk you through everything.
Okay, so let's walk through that. What are those steps to make sure the data is C3RTIFY'd?
First, you upload the data. You can even use a URL. It's that flexible. Then you add in the important details, like the name of the study, a short description so everyone knows what they're looking at. Then you can clean up the data in a table view, make sure everything's accurate and good to go.
Sounds pretty straightforward so far. What's the final step?
You hit that Store Data button, and that's when things get really interesting. The certificate is generated, and the data gets its unique fingerprint called a hash. That hash is then recorded on the blockchain. And here's the kicker, it all happens in real time. You can track the progress, see status updates as each data point gets certified.
So it really emphasizes transparency and that everyone's accountable. But talking about checking up on things, what about validation? How do we know that data stays safe over time?
Validation is all about that ongoing assurance. You're basically comparing the data now to that original fingerprint on the blockchain. If they match, the data hasn't been messed with. It's still in its original state.
So it's like this constant quality control check, making sure nothing's gone wrong with the data. And like you said before, anyone can do this, right?
Exactly. And that's what makes C3RTIFY so powerful. It builds trust, not just for researchers, but for regulators and patients too.
Now, we can't talk about C3RTIFY without talking about the people behind it, Circular Protocol. What can you tell us about them?
Circular Protocol is more than just a tech company. They're leading the way in what's called decentralized science, or Desci. They're all about using blockchain to make healthcare and research more trustworthy and efficient.
Desi, yeah. I've heard the term, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So basically, Desci wants to change how scientific research is done. Make it more open, transparent, collaborative, a big change from how research usually works, which is often very siloed.
So it's like taking the idea of open source software and applying it to science. That sounds incredibly powerful.
It is, and it fits perfectly with what C3RTIFY wants to do, to make clinical trials more trustworthy. By making data more accessible and verifiable, C3RTIFY helps researchers work together better and build on each other's findings.
It sounds like C3RTIFY is just the beginning of what Circular Protocol is doing. Are they involved in other Desci projects or initiatives?
Oh, absolutely. They're very active in the Desci space, always looking for new ways to use blockchain in different research areas.
That's fascinating. I'll definitely have to look into their work more. But for now, let's focus back on C3RTIFY. We've talked about the what and the why, but how about the how?
You mean the actual nuts and bolts of the platform itself? Yeah, let's dive into that next. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into C3RTIFY. So let's really get into how this platform works.
Okay, so we know C3RTIFY uses blockchain for that tamper-proof record of clinical trial data, but how does that actually translate into, real-world benefits? Our sources mention cost reduction, risk mitigation, and streamlined compliance. Can we break those down a bit?
Sure, absolutely. Let's start with cost reduction. Traditional clinical trials, they involve so much manual work, so much paperwork, it takes forever, and it costs a ton of money. C3RTIFY automates a lot of that, which frees up resources.
So it's about efficiency then, cutting out those really tedious tasks so time and money can be used better elsewhere.
Exactly. Think about all that time spent on data entry, verification, reconciliation. C3RTIFY streamlines all of that, which leads to big cost savings.
That makes sense. Now, how about risk mitigation? How does C3RTIFY handle the potential risks that come with those traditional trials?
That's where the whole blockchain can't be changed thing is really important. By creating this tamper-proof record, C3RTIFY really minimizes the risk of data being manipulated or faked. And we know that can have serious consequences.
It's like having a constant guard dog watching over the data, making sure it stays accurate from the moment it's entered. But isn't blockchain known for being kind of slow? How does C3RTIFY handle the huge amounts of data from a clinical trial?
That's a good question. Yes, some blockchains can be slow, it's true. But Circular Protocol, the team behind C3RTIFY, they designed their system for efficiency. They optimize their blockchain to handle the amount and speed of data that you see in clinical trials.
So they've found a way to make sure the security doesn't mean sacrificing speed and performance.
Exactly. And this enhanced security, it doesn't just protect the research findings, it also protects that sensitive patient information, reducing the risk of data breaches.
Okay, so we've talked cost and risk. What about that third benefit, streamlined compliance? How does C3RTIFY make it easier for clinical trials to deal with all those complicated regulatory requirements?
Remember how Circular Protocol is committed to those strict standards, like GDPR and ICAI? Well, C3RTIFY is built with those regulations in mind from the very beginning. The platform's features, like the audit trail and the data integrity checks, make it way easier to show you're compliant and provide all the documentation that regulators need.
So it's not just about meeting the requirements, it's about making the whole process smoother and more transparent.
Exactly. It's a win-win. Researchers spend less time on paperwork, and regulators can be more confident in the data.
Sounds like they've thought of everything, but technology is always changing, right? What about the future of C3RTIFY? Our sources talk about some interesting new features they're working on.
Yeah, one that really stands out is batch processing. Imagine you have this massive data set from a huge trial. Trying to process each record one by one, it would take forever.
That sounds like a computational nightmare.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Batch processing lets C3RTIFY handle those huge amounts of data much more efficiently. It can group records into batches and certify them all at once. So the processing time is drastically reduced.
So it's all about speed and being able to handle more and more data.
Right, and as healthcare data just keeps growing, this is going to be really important.
Another interesting one is the integration with hospital databases using SQL. That seems like a big deal.
It is. Think about it. Hospitals could just upload data straight from their systems into C3RTIFY. No more manual transfer, less risk of mistakes, and the whole process is much smoother.
It's like a secure and efficient pipeline connecting hospitals to the research world.
Exactly. It's a glimpse into what C3RTIFY sees for the future. A future where data flows easily between all parts of the healthcare system.
That's a really inspiring vision. It's about more than just the technology, though, isn't it?
You're right. It brings us back to Circular Protocol and their focus on decentralized science, or Desci. It's about creating a research environment that's more open, transparent, and collaborative.
We talked about Desci a bit earlier, but can we dig a little deeper into what it actually means and why it matters for C3RTIFY?
Of course. Desci wants to break down those walls that often exist in research. By making data more accessible and verifiable through blockchain, C3RTIFY helps researchers build on what others have done.
So it's like building this global network of researchers who can work together more effectively and speed up scientific progress.
Exactly. And this collaborative approach fits perfectly with C3RTIFY's goals. It's not just about securing data, it's about using that security to enable better collaboration and innovation.
That's really powerful. But as we said, technology isn't everything, right?
You're absolutely right. We can't forget about the human element.
Yeah. What are some of the ethical things to consider with a platform like C3RTIFY?
Well, C3RTIFY itself is focused on data security and integrity. But it's important to remember that how this data is used raises bigger ethical questions. For example, how do we make sure a patient's privacy is protected and that they have control over their data, especially in a system where data is easily shared and verified?
That's a really important point. Just because we can share and verify data easier doesn't mean we should. Not without thinking about what it means ethically.
Exactly. And then there are questions about access and fairness. How do we make sure everyone benefits from these technologies and that they don't make existing inequalities in healthcare worse?
These are all really important questions. It sounds like C3RTIFY and Desci in general, while very promising, really need us to think carefully about their impact on society.
Absolutely. We can't just focus on the cool technology. We need to keep talking about the ethical side of things too.
It's a good reminder that technology is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's up to us to guide how it's developed and make sure it's used ethically and responsibly.
I completely agree. So we've been really deep into the details of how C3RTFI works. But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
You mean the wider impact of blockchain in healthcare?
Exactly. C3RTFI focuses on clinical trials, but blockchain has so much potential in other areas of healthcare too.
Absolutely.